Sarah, you want me to wait, right?
Yeah, I think you can.
That's
stop.
fine. I'm just checking.
Mia, I'm live streaming it on the Brooklyn Tech PA YouTube for anybody that can't get in.
Okay. Okay. So
Can you put a message in? I'm just trying to make sure it's working. It's just buffering, but
so we cannot maximum our capacity here.
just we just need to ask people if we could put something in the chat to people that are waiting.
But I actually don't see I don't see the waiting room.
Okay.
I don't know why. I don't see the waiting room.
Maybe you could post on the Facebook board, and that might help out too, to let people know. I'm not home right now, otherwise I would do it.
Yeah, anyone can post on the Facebook group or WeChat group. Okay, so then just let people know. And Kim, can you send the link of the YouTube link to the chat box here, so then we can share. Never mind. I think we can start, and then I will check the link, and I will share on the WeChat group and the Facebook group, so people can see, can watch.
You could also record it too. On Zoom, there's a way to record, so you can record it, and then people can watch it after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. Okay. I will start the record it, and then we can start.
I am recording it. I have it recording.
Then I will stop.
I am trying to record. Somebody keeps stopping it. I am recording.
Oh, sure. Sorry, because I thought I started recording, so I think it's set. So how about this? Cool. So we are recording, and we also putting on YouTube. So I think now we are good. I will send the link to parents, and on WeChat and group and Facebook group. So Sarah.
Yes.
Yeah, you have the floor. You can decide when to start.
Yeah, we can start now.
Okay, cool.
Understand?
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Thank you, Sarah, for initiating this with me. So I'm going to be talking about the Common App essay, the personal statement, and also I'll talk about the supplemental essays for the individual colleges. Oops. So this is just background. I part-time teaching at Fordham. I've been doing that for a while now, and this is where the schools I went.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt, because we saw we see the screen is black. It's loading.
My screen?
Yeah, you're sharing your screen, but we say it's a loading. It's a black.
So what does that mean?
Can you maybe now it's good.
Now it's good?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, this is I teach at Fordham, and this is where I went to school. As you know, competition to get into colleges has increased intensely in the last 10 years or so. And this slide is just showing that from 2008 to 2021, NYU applicants almost tripled. So over 100,000 kids applied in 2021. And the number of acceptances is not tripling. So it's, sad. It's just more competitive than it's ever been for students. It's also easier to apply because of the Common App than it used to be. But it's, as you know, it's a competitive world. The good news is that since your students are at Brooklyn Tech and they're fine students, they're going to be competitive regardless. This talk is going to address, assuming that the academic bar is high and it's where say everyone has 3.5, 3.8, 3.9, and they're going to be competing for slots that they say NYU only has 10 and they have 100 kids with the same academic GPA and the extracurriculars. So the essay can make a difference in the way that a lot of schools are looking at the community that they're making, and they want to see if the student's a good fit. So assuming that the student has the academics, then they want to see, is the student a good fit for a college? And that's where the essay plays a nice, important role. And just the personal statement by itself, but then also the individual essays, the supplemental essays, which I'll talk about also. And those are for schools like NYU, Columbia, Chicago, etc. They're going to have their own essays on top of the personal statement. So the essay is a way for the student to make themselves known to the school. It's also it's a persuasive tool. Students are learning to persuade and argue in their writing, in their English classes in high school. And this is another rhetorical strategy or form of argument. It's not the typical thesis-driven argument, but it's still an argument. So these are the common app essay prompts for this year, where admissions due dates are coming up. And so your students are looking at 6 prompts, these 3 and these 3 plus the 7th one. Now, the maximum they can write for the personal statement is 650 words. So it's like a side and a half. Now, I'm just going to go back to the first one. Notice how broad this is. Some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. So the challenge is for students to choose a topic that they can write about that is particular to them. And part of the challenge is to break down these broad topics to something meaningful and doable for the student. So when I'm working one-on-one with students, we spend a decent amount of time looking at potential topics and then narrowing it down and then working with it. Sometimes the topic changes midstream. But this number 2, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you? What did you learn? So notice these are personal. This is not an academic essay, and that's part of the reward and the satisfaction, but also the challenge, because students are not used to writing about themselves in a personal narrative. And so it takes some time, and most people struggle in some ways with talking about themselves and being able to move people to feel, and that takes some work. So the students have to write about themselves. The more student knows themselves, the better. Some students are great academically, but they haven't had a lot of experiences outside the classroom. And those students, it's sometimes harder for them they know themselves as a student, but they don't yet know themselves in maybe more significant contexts. And sometimes it's harder for them to talk about themselves. So this is general. Some people are great students and they're comfortable with themselves. Some people have trouble accessing their feelings, and this is an essay that's about feeling more than it is about analysis or argument, quote unquote, in the traditional sense. They need to develop a so what, the significance of the experience. The writing shouldn't be generic, it shouldn't be broad. So they need to be specific, and that helps the student stand out to their particular story. It's not a 5-paragraph traditional argument analysis, as I pointed out. Organization is different than what they're trained to write in their traditional essays. And when I work with students, I give them an architecture, an organizing principle that I think is helpful. And storytelling, or just skills of being able to share is very important as well. So some tips, and I was at the Brooklyn Tech Parent Association website earlier today, and their personal statements, I think there are 50, a total of 100 from personal statements that students have written that have helped them get into Ivy League schools. So it's really helpful for students to read these personal statements that are out there that have been deemed effective. And they should pay attention to the how it's written, but also the theme is written. The structure is helpful, and the students ideally gives them a lot. They need to spend a lot of time in this essay. It's not something they can do in one sitting for sure. I usually work with students at the beginning of the summer, and I'm still working with some kids to finish a personal statement now for the November 1st deadline. This slide is basically saying that it's hard for all of us to, with language alone, to impact readers. So it's easier, like you see, I'm gesticulating, you hear my tone of voice. It's easier to make an impact when we're in front of a person with our words because there's other stimuli going on. But there's just the page itself, or the doc itself, it's much more challenging. So one of the things that happens when students are being trained and taught to write is that academic writing is chock full of ideas like democracy or freedom. Those are theoretical, abstract concepts. Like North Korea calls itself a democracy. And clearly their democracy is not what we would consider democracy. So these words like heavy and democracy are abstract. They have multiple meanings. And if a student uses these terms to describe themselves or an experience, there's too much broadness. It's too vague, or it's too generic, it's too abstract. So it's not going to affect the heart and soul of a reader. So one of the things I encourage students to do is to, use words that are imagistic. See my cursor down here, imagistic, concrete, and specific. So versus abstract. So I could say my son was born heavy, which would be abstract, and it wouldn't tell you really that much. Well, how much? What does that mean? Or I could say my son was born at 22 pounds. I'm making this up. 22 pounds not only is specific, it also is memorable. And that's what these essays hopefully do, is they stick in the reader's claw, in their gut, and they're memorable. And that doesn't mean the student has to have amazing experiences. It just means the writing needs to be done in a way that's effective to move, to have language and feelings and end ideas that stick with the reader. So heavy is abstract, it will not move readers, but words like 21 pounds would make it have an effect. Now, before I go on, it doesn't mean that the essay shouldn't have abstractions in terms of ideas. If a student was writing, say, and I had a student write about heavy, we'll see in a second, she was writing about her weight, and she was also discussing this idea of what it means to be heavy and how it affected her self-esteem. So there's certainly a really important place for ideas, but you also want to have an essay that balances the ideas with the visceral stuff. What does it mean if I feel heavy? So this is an example of the student. I was living in Seattle and I had an office space. She came to my office and she was very heavy. And she told me she lost 60 pounds. And I said, wow, it's amazing. How did that happen? And she said, I said, well, what was the turning point because she wasn't taking care of her diet and exercise. She wasn't doing that. She said, well, the turning point came and she told me the story, and it became her opening. And this is the opening of her story. So it's 1, 2, 3 suck. In terms of the opening of her essay, she told me a story, and I said, wow, let's get this down. And it's 1, 2, 3 suck. My mom yelled, we almost have it. I was trying with all my might to squeeze into what should have been my homecoming dress. It was the perfect dress, light blue, sparkles, everything I ever wanted. As my face turned red from holding my breath, my mom suddenly stopped pulling at the back zipper, looked at me and said, it's just too small. Now, what this does is involves the reader in the pain of the student who can't get the dress with her mom's help over her shoulder. And it gives us an image that I could visualize what that must have been like. So this is very effective in having the readers feel. And at the end of the day, feeling will always trump idea in terms of making an impact. We make most of our decisions not from an idea, but from, well, it feels good or it doesn't feel good. So this is a good example of simple, clear images of language that the students can use to move readers. And again, it doesn't mean the essay should all be like this, but it has its place, especially in the opening. So I just want to check the chat. Okay. All right. By the way, if you have questions while I'm talking, please put in the chat and then I'll answer them after the talk. So let's see, we have this. So the dress, what I'm calling the dress, moves us because we can see in this feel, the student's pain, and and now we know what heavy means for this student. There's no, well, not that she used it, but just as an example for our purposes of language that can be more pointed. So when I encourage students to be naming, as in, if someone writes, well, I grew up in New York, that's different than I grew up in Borough Park, or I grew up in the Lower East Side. And those namings of neighborhood express a certain, that they have some personality, and that helps the students stand out. So anytime, or most of the time, where the students can be naming and specific, that's very helpful. Most students are not used to this at all, and it's totally foreign to them, and it takes some work. But they could, it's not rocket science. It's just to be aware of it. So the other, what I'm calling the secret sauce here, is any experience, the students, whatever they're going to be writing about, is writing about an experience. And so that experience, let's say someone goes scuba diving, they need to be able to say something significant about that experience. Why are you writing about this experience? Or if they play ping pong or badminton, whatever it is, or they go hiking. So sometimes it's not, in fact, more often than not, it's hard for kids to not just say what happened, but to say, well, this is why it's important. And I see this, I see this with my students. I'm working with upperclassmen at Fordham, and it's hard for students to take an experience and then say, here's this is what matters to me about it. And so high schoolers, even if they're juniors and seniors, this is something they're not quite used to. So this is an example of a student I helped some years ago when I was in Seattle. And she wrote about being a peer sexuality educator. This was a program where high schoolers would go to junior highs and teach junior high kids about puberty and growing up and getting to know their bodies and all this stuff. Now, it turns out she got into Stanford, Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, and I'm not kidding. And this is part of her essay. And what she does here is she comments about her role as a peer sexuality educator. Notice she says, I do this, and it could be I do anything. And then she has because. This because is really important because it's saying to the reader, oh, okay, the student is mature enough to be able to comment and have ideas, beliefs about the experience. And I'll just read the first sentence. I am a peer sexuality educator because I want my students to know that while the physical changes of puberty are prescribed, only we can determine how we view ourselves and how we let others treat us. And then she goes on, and she's clearly saying, here's what I think, and I'm going to tell you why. So the two balls that the students want to juggle is, I have this experience, and I'm going to tell it vividly, and I'm going to then be able to talk about it in a way that you get to know me and what I think about this experience. Again, if there are any questions, just put them in the chat. Now, this has come up a lot for me, so it's a helpful slide. Parents, more often than students, they think that the kid needs to write about all their great experiences academically, especially, but the activities. And this essay is not that. The colleges have the student's record. They're going to have all the activities. They're going to see the GPA, the SAT, and the ACT2, and all that. This is, so it's not to build a resume. It's not to say, it's to more say, I want to let you in about me so you get to know me. So at the end of the day, you're going to say yes, because you want to have like a coffee with me. That it seems like it's a good fit. And that's besides the academics. Again, this essay is not about the academics. It's about the human, the experience. The essay also needs to have a so what. In other words, and this is about the commentary. It's not just enough to say I did something, like I created a company. It's just as important to be able to say, and here's what's important about that to me. The so what should be easy to be identified. Some main themes are like students are often write about their identity or their self-confidence. They usually show a maturation. And usually what I encourage students to do to look at it as a trajectory, a narrative arc. I started here, like the girl was heavy. And with that physical heavy, she had all these issues about anxiety and low confidence. And then she started to diet and exercise. And the end of the essay, she has lost weight, her grades go up, and she feels confident. So we go on a little journey with the student. It's very effective to help endear the writer, the student, to the admissions folks. We like stories. Humans like stories. So this is a sum up, basically. The how of the essay is as important even more than the what. I've had people write about very mundane things. A student wrote about brushing her teeth with her brother in the bathroom. That was their bonding time. And it was a great essay. It does not have to be a heavy or deep or extraordinary experience. It's more the how that's being shared that's important. And just to recap, imagery, naming, and details are helpful to stand out. There's voicing that, and also personality, obviously, and commentary shows a mature perspective. And I would add that perspective by the narrative arc is very helpful. I've already said this, but just to bring this home, I was helping a student who went scuba diving. She almost died. And she wanted to write about this experience. She had to go to the hospital. It was very dramatic. But she couldn't say anything about that. There was no, so what? There was no, well, what did you learn from this? And it was very sad. And talking to her, trying to understand, I said, well, what did your parents, did your parents visit you in the hospital? And it turns out her parents were not in the hospital. She said they were at the bar and they were always drinking. And the student was it was very sad, and she couldn't get her, which made total sense. She wasn't able to articulate all the hurt she felt. So she couldn't write about this very extraordinary, quote unquote, experience. It was too difficult. On the other hand, someone wrote about shaving a guy, and he went to Brown, and that was an essay that shows his maturation. Obviously it's a physical maturation, but it's, for the student, it was an emotional maturation too. So this is a very mundane thing, and the student goes to Brown. The scuba diver was, very traumatic for her, but she couldn't write about it. So I share this just to note that it doesn't necessarily matter what the student writes about in terms of how important or not it seems from the outside. It's what the student can really share and has something behind it that they want to share. Just some do's and don'ts with the topic. Oh, sorry about that. Some people worry about writing about difficult issues, as in if some people I've helped have had some emotional stuff, and they've written very well about that, but it really depends on the student. It depends what the student is interested. Some people, the last thing they want to do is be that personal. Other people are comfortable with it. I think what happens is, especially with very ambitious families, sometimes there's a lot of strategizing. What do the colleges want to hear? And what the problem with that is that it can get in the way of students writing about what they really want to say. And for me as a writing teacher and a tutor, I think it's really important for the writing that the student be genuine, because the writing comes from the feelings and the heart. And if the student is thinking about and strategizing, it's going to take away from that genuineness and that voice, and it will be more difficult to write, and it won't be as effective, in my opinion. So I encourage people to trust themselves, to take risks, to explore, again, be specific, and to share their thinking. By the way, the sharing the thinking, the commentary is very important for the very elite schools, or even not the very elite, but the very good schools and the good schools and the excellent schools all want to see kids who are thinking and not and can have something to say, that they're not just inhibited. So what this now this slide is about the supplements. Remember, your students can be applying, say, to 10 schools, 8 schools, 12 schools. Majority of them are going to have their own essays on top of the personal statement. And these essays are really important to help schools determine fit. It's on top of the college, the broad personal statement. It's now like, how are you going to involve yourself at NYU? How are you going to take advantage of the curriculum? How are you going to participate in the diversity of the community? Those kinds of things. And the students need to research the college website and, optimally go to the school too and meet people. So it's easier for them to talk about the school itself. For the very competitive schools, the kids can't be generic. If the colleges think, oh, this person's just, rubber stamping and this school could be any school, it's not going to bode well for the student. So this is just one, oh, sorry, I think I want to, yeah. So this is from University of Chicago. University of Chicago has 2 questions that the kids need to answer. How does the University of Chicago, as you know, it satisfy your desire for a particular kind of learning community and future? Please address with some specificity your own wishes as they relate to you, Chicago. So the student needs to go to the Chicago website. They need to see what's going on in the coursework, in the research world, in the labs, in the internships, etc. And they need to be specific and say, Chicago offers this, and I'm excited to do it because blah, 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 blah. Working with this professor will allow me to learn more about this, blah, 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 blah. And if the kid doesn't research enough, it's not going to be strong. So the student needs to give themselves a decent amount of time to do this. And, your specificity and how they relate to Chicago. And one caveat, the schools in big cities, it's not enough to say, I want to go to Columbia because I love Manhattan or New York City, or I want to go to Chicago because I love Chicago. The schools get disappointed with that. They want to say, what about Columbia or what about Chicago, that you can see taking advantage of the city that is offered by the college. Now, the other essay for Chicago is, look at this prompt. This is a very quirky prompt, and Chicago does this. What if the moon were made of cheese or Neptune made of soap? Pick a celestial object, reimagine its material composition, and explore the implications. Feel free to explore the realms of physics, philosophy, fantasy, the sky's the limit. Now, Chicago really wants kids to use their imagination and to show their personality. In a way, if your student likes this kind of stuff, like look at number 2, what's so easy about pi? Of course, this is a pun on pi, the mathematical symbol. It's just a good litmus test. Say, oh, maybe Chicago's not for me, or cool, I really like this kind of stuff. So this is Chicago. Now, one thing that happens with students, their tone of voice in these essays is really important, especially, in both essays, in both the personal statement and the supplements. But the supplements are basically like a job interview. And some kids are not, they haven't been on many interviews. And so sometimes kids think they need to teach, or they whine, or they preach, instead of just share. So I was giving a talk at Stuyvesant before COVID, and a parent said, well, my student has done all these great things. How can that student say about whatever without boasting? And I said, the answer is to share. It's not, I'm so great at this, but I love this. The feeling I love, or it excites me, that's just saying I'm passionate about something. And that enthusiasm is really important. And this is about tone of voice. So this is an example of a STI student, and this is for Harvard. They want to know what kids did over the summer. And he said, due to the workload from my school and extracurricular communities, I don't have much time to work on improving my violin during the school year. And right away, if you notice, this tone is whining, is complaining. I don't have much time. And that's true. And God bless him. But at the same time, I don't think it's a great way to endear yourself to an audience. So I shared my thoughts with him on that, and he revised it. And now it became, I love playing the violin. I participate in orchestra, chamber music, and perform solo works. And so it's more endearing. The only, and I'll be totally honest, the voice here is a little less interesting than his whining voice. This is more voiced. But for me, as someone to catalyze students to get the best shot into the school, I felt it was more important to show enthusiasm than to be complaining. But again, these are personal choices in aesthetics. Here are some questions that come up during the process. My student writes essays all the time. What's a big deal? The big deal is that it's a big, hopefully it's so competitive, as I started the talk. And so if your student is a good writer, which is great, let the student do his or her thing, their thing, but make sure a good reader and not a peer, because the kids are very comfortable showing their essays to the peer, but the peer has been on the planet for maybe 17, 18 years. And it takes a while for a reader to get really sharp at this stuff. So I would say for sure, show the essay to an English teacher or guidance counselor, the parents, but don't let the student just rely on his peers. They're just not, they're just not as strong readers because of their age and experience. How long will it take my students to write the essay? That varies. I would say, 10 hours to 15 hours. It could be more, it could be less. It depends on the student. I encourage kids to start in the summer. Now, for the November deadline, we have a deadline coming up. If your student has not started, the student's got to get going. If the student has written a draft and it's getting workshopped or someone's seen it, great. Now there's a time to write the supplements for the early action, early decision, which is November 1st, some even late or mid-October. So time for this round is coming to a close. If the student doesn't know what to write about, when I work with kids, I give them a worksheet. It's very straightforward. And it's a brainstorm. And kids just brainstorm. I've had parents very nervous. The kid hasn't created a company. I'm exaggerating, or saved endangered species. Like, oh my God, my kid hasn't done anything extraordinary. Again, just remember the shaving essay. It doesn't have to be extraordinary to be a really fine essay. Oops. If your student doesn't want you to read the essay yet, I would back off. But again, make sure someone who's a good reader does. This sometimes happens. Someone's going to say the essay is great. Someone says it's not. And everyone's a little confused. I try to empower the student. I'm working now with a student who hears, I heard from the parent, what about this? And then the teacher says this, and I'm kind of in the middle. And for me, and I hope for the parents, it's the student's essay, and you want to empower the student as much as possible. There's some big choices coming down the pike now. Where to go? Where do I apply? Where do I go to school? And with this essay, who do I listen to? So I encourage everyone to help themselves, help the kid by trusting the kid's judgment. And this is a period of a lot of decisions that mean the kids need to start trusting themselves if they don't already. If the student doesn't need help, great, but just again, get a good reader. And the supplements, as I mentioned, are very important. Those are the individual college essays. And use the English department and the college office for all this stuff. Just some nuts and bolts. Common App, we saw 7 prompts, 650 words max. There's still a COVID question. It's optional, but for my money, any optional question students should take advantage of, because there's more ways of the colleges to get to know them, and that's the name of the game. Early decision is coming up and early action November 1st for the majority of them. Remember, early decision is binding. Some schools don't even offer it, but if they do, it gives you an increased odds to get in, but it is binding. Early action is still the odds are a little increased than for regular admissions, non-binding. Supplements we talked about. And again, really important, students should visit the school they're interested in, and that they can interview as well. Lastly, this is a note I got from a parent. She tells me her daughter got a handwritten note from the regional admissions officer from Stanford. It said, I read your essay 3 times, which I don't really have time to do. You were so passionate about your beliefs that I knew we had to take you halfway. Now, this is the reason I'm sharing this is not so much about Stanford, which is amazing for the student, but it's that it tells us that these essays can make an impact. And even though the college admissions are reading hundreds and hundreds, and they can maybe spend 5-10 minutes on each app, it can make a difference. So it's worth the students really, especially for the competitive schools, should take it seriously. And this is my contact info. If you have any questions, or if you want me to help your student, I'm happy to talk. And that's it. And I'll close my screen if there are questions, either verbally or through the chat. Please fire away if you are so inclined. I'm sorry, I didn't hear the echo.
Hi, Jonathan. Can I speak?
Yeah, hi, Irene.
Okay, hi. Thank you. This is really amazing, really interesting.
Okay.
I have a question. You've touched on different strategies like the so what, the how, some approaches to get into it. Would you recommend integration of these approaches, or just kind of focus on a line of some kind of a narrative and just go with that?
With the narrative, any narrative, like it's just narrative story. Every story is not just be saying what happened. Like I went to the store and got a bagel is, the narrative, and it tasted delicious. But then with that narrative has to be like, well, so what about that? Like, why are you telling us this story? Oh, it was delicious, but students need to unpack the experience. So there's perspectives going on and commentary. And so often what I have students do is, if there's a narrative arc where I started this place and then after something happened, I am now in a different place, and not physically, but emotionally, I've learned something, that the student can share their perspective and how it changed over time. And that shows not just a story arc, which is really secondary to a feeling, thinking, value, belief shift. And all that should go into the essay. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So you're actually integrating all these elements to heighten your growth, right?
Yeah. And if you look at the essays that I haven't seen, I just know they're up there at the Brooklyn Tech in the Parent Association website. There's 100 essays that kids wrote that got into Ivy League schools. If you look at those, they're going to be telling some story and how it affected them. And within that, there are different elements, such as I've been talking about imagery. But imagery is a way for the specifics of, I use that example of 21 pounds. That's an example of how language can impact a feeling response from a reader. But you can't, that's not the only thing that needs to be done. The other element is having people understand what is that stake for the student? So what? So there are different writing elements, thinking elements, feeling elements that go into any writing. So that's, does that help?
Oh, absolutely. And one last thing, what would you recommend for a student who is still kind of building up? What kind of literature, or what would you recommend they?
Well, I don't think it's about literature unless a kid likes to read. I'm a reader and I teach literature, but
Right.
My experience is that it's the students who know themselves who are most confident and can then say, here's what I think. And that, to me, is, and just in terms of this essay, and not just the essay, but that the giving students experience in life outside of the classroom, where they're taking some risks, if it's going away, if it's participating and volunteering in something, the more worldly experiences they have that they can know themselves, then they have something to say because they're forming a personality. And I think it's harder to do that in a classroom where it's very controlled and they're not in charge and they're not really taking risks in the way that it depends on the risks. But I think it's really important for their own growth to do stuff outside of class.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's very helpful.
Welcome. I see a hand. Evelyn, is that right?
Yes, hi. So I just had a question about, for example, the essay about shaving. Like, how could someone write a whole essay about that? You know what I mean? Like, I'm just kind of having like.
Well, it's so. Let me give you another example. I helped a student last year who carried hot sauce in her backpack. And I found it to be really cool. And I said, well, what's going on with that? And I don't even know. She just said I carry a hot sauce. Because part of my brainstorming with students is, what idiosyncratic stuff do you have that other people may not know, but is quote unquote important to you? Anyway, it turns out she bonded with her stepdad, no, her mom's boyfriend, over hot Indian food. And hot sauce was not just a food preference, a spice preference, but it's also emblematic of her relationship with her mom's boyfriend. They became very close. And her essay with the hot sauce as a tool and spice becomes about her relationship with her mom's boyfriend and her mom. And so the essay is not just about hot sauce, even though it featured, it's a part of it. Just like the guy was shaving, it's about coming into manhood. And there's so much depends on, the relationship with the father, the aspect of, I remember watching my dad shave and I practiced as a kid before I had any beard. And I could write a narrative about the fondness and the kind of young envy I had with my dad that he could shave and I couldn't. And then when I started shaving and how I connected with my dad as a more mature young man. So all these things are they're unpacked, and it depends on the student, depends on what relationship they're talking about. But think of it as a vessel or a metaphor for other more valiance or other things to write about or talk about. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And just one more example, a student who went to Harvard wrote about a hike with his dad, but it wasn't about that. It was about the guy's self-identifying himself as a young man and then being disappointed in his father's masculinity when his father got depressed, and then coming to terms with what does it mean to be a man. But it starts off, it's a hike. So you could say it's about a hike with his father, but it's not really about that.
Got it. Okay. No, because you know what, I mean, my son's not a senior yet, so I have time, but he happens to be a really good writer, but doesn't like to write about himself. Like, he's very good with creative writing.
Right.
So I could see him really struggling with trying to write about himself. But
right. That's part of the challenge.
Yeah. I think it's something most people probably struggle with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's why he wants to, he could practice sharing and storytelling verbally. But then with the writing, I would give him a lot of time to dig into it. I just want to move on to questions in the chat. I'm sorry, I was slow looking at the chat. Let's see. When should students start? Colleen, did this refer to juniors? This refers, when I work with students individually, I start working with them ideally the summer after the junior year. I've been hired to help kids earlier just because the parents want the kid to practice writing. And sometimes parents contact me like now, which is obviously late for this deadline. And so that adds stress. So I would say ideally after the kids finish their junior year, they should start playing with this stuff. Kona, do you have any tips on making a captivating hook? The intro is important. The thing is, when you write Kona, a captivating hook, that can be very unnatural. Hooks are hard to do if they're just saying, I need to write a hook. So it should come out of something you want to say that is going to be related to the main point of the essay. And I wouldn't worry about the hook. I would just do a write and then see, okay, how do I think I want to start this? I would write it first and then worry about the hook. Because if it comes off like I'm making a hook, then it's not a hook. It's not an effective hook, if that makes sense. I understand that my child should start with brainstorming ideas, but can you provide some tips on how to narrow down the topic? Yeah, Diane Chen, the narrowing down, what I would do, this is what I do. I'd spend an hour at least talking with the students about their topics, and they hear themselves talk about it, I ask questions, and that helps the student identify what they want to write about. So it's really important for the student to have an audience. It could be you, it could be whomever, if you hire someone. But there should be a list, and then you say, okay, what about this? Tell me more, suss it out with the student to help them narrow it. That's what I recommend. Can you share the link to the successful colleges? And I just went to the the website for the PTA. Your web is Brooklyn Tech's, and I went to the college off. I think the college office has some. Yeah, I think that's where it is. If you can't find it, I can search again. I can help you if you want. Oh, she found it. Good. In English, Ken, if English teacher has reviewed the essay, should we as parents still bother to comment? Ken, that's up to you. I would say, why not? I mean, the only I mean, you're the parent, so the student may not listen to you, but the student may, and you might feel better that you at least had a chance to comment. I think, it depends on your relationship with your student. But I would want to read it, and I might want to comment. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Again, just remember, it's your student's essay. Ideally, you're there to catalyze the student's essay and not to put your 2 cents in. Not that you would, but some parents, they lose sight of whose essay it is. Kona, you're welcome. When essay topics become available, the essays, Taruko, sorry. The topics are available now for the personal statement and for the college essays, for the individuals. So you just go to the Common App, as I showed you on the slide, or you can go to the individual colleges for their particular questions. And here's Jonathan's presentation. Oh, thanks, Anne. Okay. Other questions or comments? No? Okay, I hope this was helpful. And thank you for your time. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Oh, you're
It's
welcome.
very helpful.
Oh, I'm glad.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to email?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Do you have my email?
Yes, I took a screenshot. Of
Oh,
your
okay. Thank you.
information. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Very nice. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Can I ask one last question? Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm a freshman student, but I just want to get ready because I'm not that good at writing essays, but I like writing like stories.
Yeah, great.
So how do you think I could incorporate my writing into like essay writing?
Into what?
Into essay writing, like stories into essays.
Well, part of it depends on your teacher. If you're thinking about for essays for school or on your own.
For school.
So what I hear when you're asking is about voice and how could you use your writing, like creative voice in your academic essay. And obviously the structure is going to be, the teacher usually is very strict with the structure, and it's going to be thesis driven. But you could still, your word choice and the sentence structure could be yours, and the tone could be yours. If the teacher gives you, especially the first person is more, it's easier to do that. So that's one way of doing it. And you could always write on your own and develop your voice there. I would read, the more you read, especially nonfiction, the more you'll come across voice and identify writers for their voice. And that's so much about word choice and tone and again, sentence structure, but you could play with that.
Thank you so much.
Does that make sense? Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, it does.
Great. Other questions? No? Okay.
Oh, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Anne from the
Hi, Anne.
chat. I heard you say that there's a COVID question, and that
Yes.
is a very different thing because obviously we didn't have it before. And that the student should write something in that COVID essay.
Well, my philosophy is the more the college, the admissions folks get to know the student, the better. So here they're saying optional essay. And as soon as I see that, and I tell my students, take advantage of that. There's no downside to it. And it's giving them more information on you. And it could be a plus. So, it is optional, but your student might want to take advantage of that.
But your suggestion is to take the advantage of it, but they want to hear something about how So it's not a whiny thing, obviously, right? It's just
Well-
what they did during COVID. I mean, it's a
Well,
very
some
specific
kids-
question, so I was
Well-
just curious about how that would be.
Well, it depends on the student too, right? Some kids did a lot of interesting stuff over COVID because they were home alone. And like I worked with a student and he learned to cook. He taught himself with a friend to cook in ways that he wouldn't have happened. And so it depends on the student, depends on how the experience was. But even if it was a negative experience, that's important, especially if it impacted their performance. So I don't think that, I think it's probably worthwhile to at least think about and talk about with a student, see what they say. If it's optional, but my general philosophy is if with these optional moments that it makes sense to at least think about, because you're helping the student get known outside of their record. And that's what this is about.
Thank you. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Can I ask one more question? Somebody told me that it's not good for someone who's an athlete to write about an experience like an athletic experience. Is that true? Because like my son is an athlete.
No. It all depends on how it's written. So much of this, these do's and don'ts, you don't, the thing is, you don't want to have a cliched story. And that's what that means when they say don't write about athletics.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had a student, she was a soccer player, and after an injury, her identity as an athlete was crushed, and she didn't know who she was without her athletics. And she really went on a journey, and it was and she wanted to write about it. And it was a very fine essay, and she got into her first choice school. Again, it depends. So much of this is about what the student wants to write about. And if your student wants to write about something, that's like 98% of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's something about being an athlete and what's that, there's so much about athletics besides just, scoring or whatever. So I wouldn't be closed-minded to that. I think, I would suss it out.
And what about if it's an experience when they were younger? Do you know what I mean? Is that like...
Well, that becomes problematic because you don't want the student to just be sharing when they were 8 or 10 or 12 or 13 or 14. They're applying now as a young adult. They need to bring that young adult perspective. Now, what they can do, and I've helped students do this, they write about an earlier experience, and then they write, well, here's what I thought about it then, and now I'm doing something still. Let's say they're still an athlete, or they're still like I helped a student, she wanted to be a journalist when she was in elementary school, and she was writing for the school newspaper in high school, and she was actually working for a publication in high school. So she shows her maturation in this one area that she started as a youngster.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Mr. Dewa, I have a question. I've written some drafts on the process of final draft, but I hate everything I'm writing. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. You should get someone to read it, and maybe they don't hate it. I think it's hard for us to judge our own stuff. So I would have someone read it and then see what they say. Michael, if I volunteered in the hospital last year during COVID, can I write it on it? Yeah, of course. Michael, what's important is what do you want to say about the volunteering experience? Of course you could write about it. That's really cool. Natalie, yeah, I'll share my screen. So this is an email that from my new website, jonathan@ivscoaching.com. And I'm happy to read your email, of course. Crystal, you don't want to be overly complicating your essay. When you write about having several interests or influences, it's much more effective in general to focus on one thing. If you're throwing in a bunch of stuff, it's not as effective for the reader to get what you're trying to say. Better to go single and deep than broad and varied. They're going to see all your different stuff on the other aspects of your application.
All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, I think that's it. All right, Sarah. You're still here. Okay, I'm going to say good night.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
It's Mia. Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you
thanks,
for
Mia.
having
I hope
me.
it was helpful.
Hope you have a wonderful night.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Sarah.
So probably we could do another workshop next time.
Sure, just shoot me an email. These are fun
Yeah.
for me.
Because I don't know why this tonight only minimum 100 people, but I saw the regeneration about 300 more, you know.
Wow.
But
That's a
tonight,
lot.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, no problem. I already spread the word to on WeChat group and also Facebook, so people can see your presentation.
Thank you.
And also next time, I think we can see if we can increase our number.
Okay. I
Those
know
capacity.
some Zooms allow you to do a lot more. I think it might be expensive or whatever. They might have to pay more for it, but.
Yeah, we'll look for that. We'll yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, well,
thank
have a
you.
great
Thank you.
night.
That's very helpful.
Oh, I'm glad.
You too.
Okay. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
Let me
So-
see. I think I think we are still recording. Hold on a second. We should.
So we start there, right?
Yeah,
have
yeah. We should stop the recording first.
Yeah. Mhm. So Vito can do the recording.
Yeah, yeah. He will put the recording on YouTube, and then we can include the link to Tech Talk. So can you drop a paragraph for today events, and then include the link tomorrow, and then send to Lisa so she can include in Tech Talk.
To the TED Talk, right? So
Yeah.
I don't have the link. So maybe Vito should make.
No problem. You can just drop a paragraph about tonight's event, and then tomorrow and then send to Lisa, and when we have the link, I will ask Lisa to include the link.
All right.
So then people can, who missed this event, they can just watch on YouTube.
Yeah, before I just emailed to who regeneration the meeting, so I send the email to them. So tell them we will send them the link for the record.
That's great.
Yeah. And then I send the link, the YouTube link to them. So I think they will watch they're watching the YouTube.
Good. Okay, good job.
Okay, thank you.
Good job. I think, yeah. So I think we can end the room.
All right.
Okay, I'll leave. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Yeah, have a good night. Bye bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Sarah. Bye bye. Good night.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.